Well, hello, everyone. Today I'm joined by Ron Wallace, the chair of the Coal Committee, and I'm pleased today to release the Coal Policy Committee's final reports and announce that Alberta plans to protect the eastern slopes. Approximately 1 year ago, I stood in front of Albertans and committed to listening to them. I told Albertans that we had heard their concerns and questions about coal development on sensitive lands, and I told them that we would listen, not simply to one group or a vocal minority, but to all Albertans. We wanted to hear their views on the right path forward. We committed to listening to all those who care about this issue, and we set out to make that happen. That's why the Independent Coal Policy Committee was appointed last March to lead a comprehensive engagement that would inform the province's long-term approach to coal. We're happy to deliver on that commitment today. And I want to say that I am grateful, truly grateful, for the work that the committee did. Their activity was intensive and very detailed under the capable leadership of Chairman Ron Wallace. I want to thank Ron and the other committee members, Fred Bradley, Eric Northpagan, Bill Trafford, and Natalie Charlton, for their exhaustive work. Over 5 months, they heard from many, many Albertans. The committee received more than 25,000 survey responses and over 1,000 direct emails. It held over 70 meetings and received more than 170 technical submissions, all related to coal development and environmental protection. The committee's work was wide-ranging and thorough, and I truly appreciate their diligence. I also want to recognize the significant depth, breadth, and volume of insight that Albertans and Indigenous peoples submitted for consideration. This also includes input from many, many municipalities, towns and cities, rural communities. Armed with this information, the committee produced 2 reports that provide a clear and balanced look at this complex issue. The engagement report and final report are detailed and reflect the broad spectrum of thoughts, advice, and perspectives of this great province. The committee thoughtfully analyzed and compiled this information into their reports, and in the end, they put forward 8 principal recommendations. The recommendations include actions to modernize Alberta's coal policy, to articulate land use guidance for coal exploration and development, to strengthen Indigenous involvement in land use planning, to review coal tenure and royalty regimes, and ensure that any proposed projects are rigorously assessed using net benefits tests. These reports and recommendation, in combination with input from Indigenous communities, make it clear that modernizing Alberta's management of coal resources is complex, and they have recommended a path forward. Our government is acting on that advice. We accept in principle the findings of the committee, and we are well positioned to act on their recommendations. Alberta has a strong regulatory process in place to oversee coal and other industrial development in our province. But we have heard concerns of Albertans loud and clear, and will work to improve public trust and how projects are reviewed, regulated, and reclaimed, and how cumulative effects are managed. And that's why we're charting a clear path forward. Every place in Alberta is beautiful. I was born here. I've lived my entire life in this province, and every corner of it is beautiful. But the beauty of the eastern slopes is unparalleled, and Albertans have told us that. The measures we are announcing today will help ensure that the eastern slopes are protected now and for future generations. Effective immediately, our government is extending the restrictions on coal exploration and development in the eastern slopes. I am issuing a new ministerial order that suspends all coal-related exploration and development activity in the eastern slopes. No new activity will be allowed. Let me repeat that. No new activity will be allowed. To be clear, this order will expand the current restriction on exploration on Category 2 lands to also include Category 3 and 4 lands. Coal activity has never been allowed in Category 1 lands and will continue to be so. The ministerial order will remain in place until direction on coal activity can be embedded into updated land use plans tailored to support the unique needs of this area. In addition, the reinstated 1976 coal policy will remain firmly in place. It's not going anywhere. However, will not put hardworking Albertans out of work or endanger existing mine projects, existing operational mines, and projects that are in an advanced process. The new ministerial order does not extend to activities already in progress for active mines and advanced projects, nor does it impact activities related to security or safety. The order allows for abandonment and reclamation activities to continue to proceed throughout the eastern slopes. I also want to be clear that all existing legislation related to coal activities and our vigorous regulatory system will also remain in place. Any advanced projects would still have to go through that rigorous regulatory process to be either denied or approved. Over the past 20 years, Alberta has experienced tremendous growth. Our population grew by over 1 million people during this time, and the size of Alberta's economy grew in lockstep. This is positive, but it can also present some challenges that need to be addressed through insightful planning. That's why we're keeping the new ministerial order firmly in place until land use planning for the eastern slopes is completed. Regions like our unique eastern slopes are important for headwater protection, fish and wildlife habitat, as well as for recreation, tourism, cultural practices, forestry, minerals, agriculture, and more. Land use planning looks at the right way to support a specific area. It considers multiple uses and cumulative impacts. It looks at the current needs and future opportunities, and is informed by consultation with Albertans, Indigenous communities, and many others. In the coming months and years, additional clarity regarding land use planning activities will be put into place. Specifically, the coal categories 1, 2, 3, and 4, will be retained. These coal categories will provide a strong foundation for integrated land use planning discussions. This will begin with an update of Alberta's Eastern Slopes policy in the coming months to include the 1976 coal categories. Over the longer term, it will be followed by development of new regional, sub-regional, or issue-specific plans for other areas developed under the Alberta Land Stewardship Act or other legislation. Some of this planning has already begun. For example, work is currently underway on the Upper Smoky and Berlin sub-regional plans in the Eastern Slopes as part of our commitment to support the recovery of Alberta's woodland caribou. Public engagement on these two sub-regional plans is anticipated before the end of next year. Also, the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan, which was established in 2014, under that legislation, it requires a 10-year review, and that must start by September 2024. Land use planning is important work, and this takes time. That's why the new ministerial order that I'm announcing today will remain firmly in place to protect the eastern slopes until the necessary planning is completed. These expanded steps all directly relate to the committee's recommendations, but we know there is more work ahead. Our government will also explore the most effective ways to act on the report's other findings to benefit all Albertans. This includes enforcing existing policies and regulations and continuing work on things such as public and Indigenous involvement, reclamation liabilities, and work on water quality and aquatic ecosystems. Extensive water monitoring has already begun. However, I want to assure Albertans that the government will continue to strengthen its oversight of selenium management. In June, Environment and Parks launched a selenium management review in collaboration with the Alberta Energy Regulator. Together, they are examining Alberta's current regulatory requirements and if further action is needed. Updated policies on selenium management will be put in place following the release of new federal coal mining effluent regulations, which are expected to be finalized and published in 2023. Environment and Parks is also putting the finishing touches on new surface water quality management frameworks for both the North Saskatchewan, the Battle, and Upper Athabasca rivers. These frameworks will set expectations for clean, high-quality water that supports healthy communities and aquatic ecosystems and a strong economy. You can expect to hear more about this work from Minister Jason Nixon this spring. The steps we are taking now and in the coming days offer a practical, sensible approach to address this complex issue. Acting on the insights provided by the Coal Committee, we are charting a balanced path forward for coal resources in our province, while also protecting the sensitive areas, such as the eastern slopes. The new ministerial order, the 1976 coal policy, and ultimately land use planning will protect the eastern slopes. Together, they will expand and halt coal development and allow for detailed planning to be done that's specific for this unique and precious area. Most importantly, we are listening to Albertans. As I said earlier, there's nothing more beautiful than our eastern slopes, and our government will protect them. Thank you again to the Coal Policy Committee and to everyone who participated in this process. I will now invite the committee chair, Ron Wallace, to say a few words about the committee's work and findings.
Well, thank you, Minister. And I also want to acknowledge and thank the work of my fellow committee members. And I want to acknowledge the work and support that we had from the departmental secretariat and staff in keeping the Coal Committee informed and allow us to do our independent work. A year ago, I stood before you and said that this committee was designed to listen to Albertans. We not only listened, but we heard. And it's my view and the view of the committee that this government has heard the recommendations of the committee. There was an overwhelming reaction of Albertans in coming forward and trusting the committee and bringing forward their views to be passed on, which we have done in our engagement report, Volume 1. That report and our recommendations report will be posted shortly, as will a statement from the chair, which will be posted on the committee's independent website. I refer you to both of those. We want to thank all those people who came forward. One of the most lasting and invaluable components of our work is the tremendous amount of very high quality work that was submitted to us. Over 70 briefs, some in excess of 50 pages, were submitted to us, and that work at a scientific level will remain a touchstone for not only the report and the management of the short-term resources, but of the longer-term policy development in Alberta. One of the things that the committee pointed to, in fact, the key thing in our recommendations, is that we didn't need new legislation or policies. The legislation required to achieve the aims that Albertans expressed to us so well are already in place. They just need to be activated and they need to be completed. Minister has referred to a number of those initiatives in terms of the regional planning, but that planning process now has to extend down to the sub-regional and other integrated planning processes that have to be completed. We're very, very pleased that the government has adopted all 8 of our principal recommendations, and I look forward to discussing those further should there be any questions. Thank you. Minister?
Thank you very much. So the minister will now have some time for some questions. So we'll go to the room first. If reporters could make their way to the mic, that'd be great. That way the folks on the line can also hear the questions. And we'll ask that you identify your name and outlet. It'll be one question, one follow-up.
Yes, good afternoon. It's Jill Croteau here with Global Calgary. So my question is related to those 4 proposed mines. Why continue to allow those to go ahead?
So there's an exception under the ministerial order to, that allows for the continuance of 7 active operating coal mines in the province. We weren't going to shut those down. There's jobs in communities. They've been operating safely and responsibly. It also doesn't include 4 what we're calling advanced projects. Just to go over what those are, 2 of those advanced projects were on previous mining sites. Mine sites that had been mined for decades. One is the expansion of an existing mine, one of the 7 existing mines, and one is a project in the north that had been in the regulatory process for an underground mine in Category 4. All 4 of those projects have been in the regulatory stage, advanced regulatory stage, for years prior to the rescission of the coal policy. So they were in place long ago. And as you know, we can't stop and interfere with a regulatory process that's already underway. That doesn't mean they're going to be approved. Every one of those projects would have to undergo a very extensive regulatory process with a joint review panel process with the federal government. Companies will have to make decisions on whether or not they would proceed. Certainly allowing those projects to not be to excluding them from the ministerial order does not mean they're going to be developed. It does not mean that at all. It just means that they're allowed to proceed through a regulatory process to determine the appropriate movement forward. We could not kill projects that are already in the existing regulatory process, just like we can't shutter mines that are already in operation. But perhaps Ron might be able to expand a bit on that.
Right. Well, I'm glad you asked that question. It's a really important question. The committee looked at those mines that are in the regulatory process. We are a policy advisory committee. We're not a regulator. The Alberta Energy Regulator has those projects before it. They're not approved. They're in the regulatory process. The committee has full confidence that the Alberta Energy Regulator will be able to discharge its responsibilities for not only the public interest, but for the regulation of and development and approval of those mines. So you shouldn't be misled to think that projects that are entering or allowed to continue in the regulatory process are approved. They're allowed to continue in that regulatory process. The AER has demonstrated its capacity to reflect the public interest, and the committee has full confidence that that'll be followed through.
Thank you. I just had a brief follow-up. So with the Grassy one particularly, because that permit had been rejected, why allow that? Or like, are they too far into the regulatory process to pull out now? I'm not suggesting that you say what the mine is going to be doing, the company, but why let them keep going?
They still, it's been rejected by the court, and it's been rejected by both the Alberta Energy Regulator and the federal cabinet. And it's been through the courts. So but the company hasn't withdrawn the application. So it falls with the other projects. It's in the advanced regulatory stage, and it's not something that our government can or should interfere with. Just similar that our government can or should not interfere with the operation of existing mines. But to be clear, all the other projects, exploration projects, are captured by the ministerial order.
Thanks. Seeing no more questions in the room, we'll go to the phone line. So operator, our first question, please.
Graham Thompson, iPolitics.
Yes. I have a question, actually, about a different topic, if I might. It's on to do with the orphan wells and money given to companies like CNRL, $100 million. There's still not much work being done on orphan wells. Can you explain what's actually happening out there?
Sure, you might be confusing orphan wells for inactive wells. Orphan wells are wells that don't have an active owner from companies that have gone bankrupt, and that's they're paid for. The cleanup of orphan wells is facilitated by a company levy, a levy from the AER, from the Orphan Well Association, on all other active companies. That has nothing to do with public funds. It's paid for under the polluter pay principle by all the other active companies. You might be referring to the site rehabilitation program, which is federal funding that's meant to address inactive well sites. Inactive well sites are wells, oil and gas wells, that are not producing. Some of them haven't been producing for many, many years, but they still have a licensee. They still have an owner that isn't insolvent or bankrupt, and the site rehabilitation program has generated some activity to clean up those inactive wells. But to be clear, the orphan wells program is an entirely different thing.
Follow-up?
Yes, absolutely. A different topic, again, completely different. Dealing with war in Ukraine, and you've been making comments about the time now to promote more pipelines and more natural gas and oil sales from Canada. But it seems that places like Europe are just not interested in this. Are you reaching out to other countries to try and convince them to take more Alberta oil and gas? Or this seems that other countries like Europe especially want to get off fossil fuels. So do you feel you're actually swimming against the stream, upstream when it comes to this?
Sure. I'll be in Houston next week at the Sierra conference, where all of the majors, the international super majors, will be there, as well as the continental producers, as well as governments from around the world, where I will be talking about North American energy security. And I think what the situation and the invasion, the atrocious war that Russia has launched against Ukraine has highlighted is that we need to have a discussion about energy security. And we need to look at our energy policy, not only globally, but across North America. And generally, I think we need to look at a careful and delicate balance of energy security, energy reliability and affordability, as well as the very urgent and real need to reduce emissions. Over the past decade, North America and free world producers in Canada and North America and countries have focused very heavily on emissions reduction and haven't considered or taken energy security to heart. And what that's done is, in countries like Canada and North America, it's made it very, very difficult to increase or even maintain the levels of oil and gas production historically. And it's made it next to impossible to build infrastructure to get that product to market. Meanwhile, in other countries, Russia particularly, have been able to ramp up production and increase development, build infrastructure to get it to market with no environmental standards. And I think what hits home very dramatically and with a spotlight on it is what's been lacking is a whole conversation on energy security. While we have left production in the ground here in Canada, while we haven't been able to build pipelines to get our product to market, Russia has ramped up production. And now we're seeing the impact of that. So I think we need to have a thoughtful discussion on energy policy that includes all of the above. It includes climate change and emissions reduction, but it also emphasizes energy security and affordability, because that's what's been lacking over the last decade.
Next question.
Josh Aldridge, Calgary Herald.
Thanks for taking my question. Minister, you've mentioned how beautiful the Rockies are, and we've all obviously talked about the environmental impacts and all the rest. To a lot of Albertans, this was pretty obvious that the Rockies should not be touched for coal mining any further than they already are. And it was clear back in 1970 when the policy was put in place. What was further clarified in this process that was not understood previously by the government when it came to opening up, or potentially opening up, the Rockies to further exploration for coal mining?
Well, I think we took the time under the leadership of the Coal Policy Committee to listen to Albertans, all Albertans, not single voices. And what we heard very clearly was how much Albertans care about the landscape, in particular the eastern slopes. And we heard that, very similar to 46 years ago when Peter Lougheed developed the 1976 coal policy, Albertans loved the precious eastern slopes. We heard that again, so nothing's different. Albertans' views on the eastern slopes are the same today as they were 46 years ago. So what we've done, We've actually strengthened the 1976 coal policy. We've reinstated it fully, and we have hardwired the restrictions into place at the Alberta Energy Regulator with the ministerial order. And we've hardwired the restrictions not only for Category 1 and 2 lands, but also for Category 3 and 4 lands. And to emphasize what a ministerial order is to the AER, that has the full impact of law and regulation. It is the law. The ministerial order says that there are restrictions in the eastern slopes, and basically you cannot explore the mineral, coal, you cannot explore the mineral, and you cannot develop it. It's hardwired into the law, and that remains in place and in effect until land use planning is done, and it remains in place unless and until land use planning says otherwise. On top of that, it's being embedded into the eastern slopes policy over the course of the next year while land use planning is done. So we've taken the 1976 coal policy and we've given it teeth and we've made it the law.
Follow-up?
Yeah, my understanding was that this committee was created out of the public backlash that did come out of this. Why did it need this public backlash to create a committee to actually look at this? Should this not have just been common sense for the government to not open up the process to begin with?
Well, we heard a tremendous backlash from Albertans in 2020, early 2021, that they were very concerned with our rescission of the 1976 coal policy. We saw that as a problem, and we appointed the coal committee to come forward with recommendations. Their recommendations fix that problem and give us a path moving forward that's supported by Albertans and that also protects the eastern slopes.
We'll go to our last question. Operator?
Tim Birch, CTV.
Hey, thanks for taking my question. How much interest has the government received as far as land use planning is concerned, either over the last few months, or I guess how much interest do you expect will be coming after this announcement today?
Well, I think with respect to land use planning, what we're doing today is we're hardwiring with ministerial order, hardwiring the restrictions into the AER. The Eastern Slopes policy, there's a process there to embed the coal categories into the Eastern Slopes policy because it takes time to get through the land use planning. That's a process that is lengthy and will take some time. So, but to be clear, everything's halted in categories 1 to 4 until and unless that land use planning is done. So it does take time, and it's proceeding in due course. To be clear, in the South Saskatchewan regional plan needs to be opened in 2024 under legislation. Its 10-year review comes up, and at that point, coal categories will have to be considered. When the plan was first brought in 2014, it excluded coal. It excluded the coal categories because the coal policy was in place. Moving forward, what we've done here is now the land use planning must consider coal, and there's a complete halt on coal development in the Eastern Slopes unless and until that land use planning is done.
Follow-up?
Thanks.
Does Ron want to add to that?
Maybe just one here for the uninformed. I think most of us kind of know what the current status of the Grassy Mountain project is at, but can you kind of give us an idea of where those other 3 advanced projects sit currently in that regulatory review?
Sure. I think most of those questions would be best direct to the companies with regard to what their plans could be. But I would just note that the Tent Mountain project, Montum, does have has publicly put forward some plans to potentially turn that site into a pumped hydro facility, hydrogen production and pumped hydro. So there are some plans there. The Vista mine in the north is expansion, and I think it's somewhere in the regulatory process. So, but those questions are best directed to those companies because those will be commercial decisions on when and how and if they proceed to a regulatory process.
Thank you very much.